Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News at the South Florida Conservative News Site. It's Friday, June 6th, and we're going to talk about local politics here in Broward County, one of the bluest of the blue counties, which is Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, and an ever bluening, if that's a word, state here in Florida, mostly due to the billions of dollars dumped in here by the Democratic Party, and of course, the rhinos that populate most of the Republican positions herein. Today's favorite, the guy we all love to hate, the man who's constantly clouded in controversy, Jennifer. We'll call him from now on, Jennifer Gregory Tony, late of North Philadelphia, late of killing a Spanish man, late of being tied to a wife swapping series of events, late to some other shit. But now the top cop, law enforcement of Broward Sheriff, and he has decided that he will not support the federally mandated ICE policy for deportation and that his people will stay out of it as much as can be done without putting Sheriff Tony into a prison. So today we're going to talk about him and how he has now become the poster child for what is the new dangerous game out there and has been going on for quite some time here in our county and in Dade and in Palm as well. Sanctuary cities are out. The people that are able to run sanctuary cities have to be in highly populated, fixed small areas like Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, things like that. Whereas a spread out county, you operate a shadow sanctuary city, which means you do not enforce any of the laws on immigration. And then you give some story that we're worried about crime. So we're just going to focus on crime and with community relations, which is what Sheriff Tony's story is. Okay, so you have to realize first and foremost, the funniest part of this, and we're not going to mention again about Sheriff Tony murdering that kid back when he was 14, even though he did murder him and it wasn't self-defense. If you talk to any of the homicide agents that worked the case in Philadelphia, they will tell you that Tony went back into the house to get the gun to come out and shoot young Mr. Rodriguez. But that's beside the point because I don't want to be murdered by him next. So Sheriff Tony owes his job to Governor Ron DeSantis. Theoretically, people tell you Tony was a Republican, but not coming from North Philadelphia, he wasn't. And when they removed Sheriff Israel here because of his botched handling of the Stoneman Douglas shooting, Tony was promoted. Nobody could understand it. But then later on, I guess when we realized that Tony was a swinger, and there have been a lot of swingers running around the governor's mansion, from what we all understand in the news, it made a lot more sense. And then, of course, when he was up for election, the governor sent some money men down to fundraise for him to the tune of, I think, close to $200,000. So once again, what's that all tying into, right? Because obviously, when the governor says that he wants to support the ICE measures, and the sheriff that he put into office and financed says he is not going to do it, one would think that Ron's superpowers are now completely fakakta, for lack of a better term. All right. So where are we going to go with this here? So yeah, Sheriff Tony's making headlines by publicly announcing his department, the BSO, the Broward Sheriff's Office, made famous by the TV show Cops, if you're not familiar with South Florida, and the famous Nick Navarro, the miniature Cuban who used to ride around on the boat at the beginning with that little 2-inch handgun because he's going to fight crime in the ocean for some reason, right? They will not participate in the ICE raids or proactive enforcement actions. So Tony says they will notify ICE if an illegal alien is already in the jail, but that's the minimum required by law. What he's basically saying is simple. ICE don't count on us. You're on your own. One has to remember this county is still under the evil control of one Debbie Wasserman Schultz, hatchet man supreme to Hillary Rodham Clinton, the woman who screwed Bernie Sanders out of his opportunity to run for president. She is the congresswoman for most of the area, and she wields ultimate power in the community. The Republicans hold absolutely no positions here of any use except for a state committee person, and the jury's out on that guy. Not even going to mention his name, but that's all they have in the county. So when people tell you the state of Florida is Republican, the state may be, but the most populous counties are not, which is not how you want to be. Because all you have to do when you see these developments that are going on in the little counties is that they'll fill them up with Democrats, and next thing you know, Florida becomes a Democrat state, and you can do it very easily. So anyway, Broward County, as I live here, is one of the most left-wing counties in Florida. Progressive activists, open border NGOs, Democratic operatives, they're all over the place. Sheriff Tony's been facing scandals. He's been facing ethics probes. Had an uncertain political future. So what's he do? He goes to the Godfather. By throwing ICE under the bus, Tony locks in support from the likes of the Florida Immigration Coalition, the Miami Workers Center, and the Community Justice Project. And by those names, you know these are hardcore left/socialist organizations. These are groups that are openly hostile to our nation's immigration laws and cheer for sanctuary policies. Okay, so what's the impact here? ICE agents operating in Broward County are now forced to go it alone. Without full BSO, I'm just going to call them, we call them the BSO. Without full BSO cooperation, ICE agents must stage dangerous field arrests. They can't count on local data sharing. Illegal alien criminals are being released back into the community because Tony won't hold them long enough for ICE to pick them up. And the message to Broward's illegal immigrant population is loud and clear. You've got a safe haven here. Sheriff Tony is running a shadow sanctuary county, no matter what Governor DeSantis or President Trump want. And here's the irony, as I said, I'm going to keep mentioning it. It was Ron DeSantis. Again, Ron DeSantis, the governor, the famous governor, the governor who fought Disney for some reason over being somewhat gay. He'd rather fight Disney over being somewhat gay than fight the sheriff of Broward County, who is going to be openly running a sanctuary community here. This guy's supposed to be, said DeSantis is supposed to be pro-law enforcement, pro-enforcement of deportation, you know, tough on crime guy. And he was the one who put this idiot in the first place. All right. Tony was supposed to clean up Broward after the Parkland shooting. Instead, he handed the keys over to the open borders lobby. And this is why Donald Trump's deportation initiative faces an uphill battle. Not because the law isn't clear, but because the activist sheriffs in Democrat cities are deliberately sabotaging enforcement on the ground. The state of Florida, the sheriff has a lot of power. Now, if Tony had been for real back in the day when we had COVID, he did not have to enforce that law. Sheriff's office in Broward County are street police in a lot of places. They have the jails, but they are also the law enforcement organization that most of the cities have. My town has its own police, so I don't have to worry about the sheriff, but the sheriff backs us up on, like, when we find dead hookers in the canal, which we do, or somebody runs somebody over up the street, which they do, or there's a narcotics bust, which there has been, things like that, then they backstop our guys. And I'm sure we do a lot for them that they don't even want to discuss. So I know we're holding down the highway here for them, but that's a story for another day. So that's what we have going on there. Is how are you going to be doing deportations and stuff like that when this goes on? That's why you laugh when you have somebody down in Miami saying, "Oh, these guys come up and they have the mask on." Nobody remembers Elian Gonzalez. Every one of those feds was wearing a balaclava. All right. Everybody was masked up. Everybody was armored. Everybody had MP5s. Nothing has changed in the protocol of how ICE operates on a raid, or any of the other federal agents operate on a raid. It's my turn to be the victim, and the idiots just go with it. Okay. There's been, unfortunately, not enough information, once again, from the Trump administration to explain any of this stuff away. And that has been another big issue. First, big, beautiful bill. Why didn't they explain that? Didn't do a very good job. And then this, didn't explain it, didn't do a very good job. So it allows people like Tony to get in there and operate and do what he's doing, other than shaking down nightclubs and strip clubs, right? So the state legislature should tighten the laws and require the sheriffs to fully cooperate with ICE. That is going to be something that is not very much wiggle room in there. Number two, the Trump administration should aggressively sue sanctuary jurisdictions and expose sheriffs like Tony for what they're doing. They should do the old, if you see any of the old days, the NRA and all those groups would give you a report card on who's shit and who's not. They have to do this kind of stuff because these guys have to get elected. Tony's going to have to get reelected at some point, right? Obviously, he's expecting everybody who uses in the construction industry who uses slave labor, who won't give a black guy a job. By the way, Tony's black, if you don't know. Won't give a black guy a job, won't give a white guy a job, won't give a Puerto Rican guy a job, but they'll hire illegals for half the price, right? Which is why while they show you that arrest that was made upstate at University of Florida, I think you're going to find that that was a prevailing wage certified payroll job, and they were all breaking the law by hiring those hundred and some people they arrested. And those people were also breaking the law by working on the job site. And everybody knew it, and nobody expected to get busted. That's how this shit works. Okay? Because you don't see it, they don't see it, and then the citizen doesn't see it because the other two sides are in it together. Okay? So, and thirdly, the citizens need to stay vigilant and hold politicians accountable. Sheriff Tony's going to be up for re-election. Don't re-elect the idiot. Okay? He is not making this, his crime stats are not going to set the world on fire. And more importantly, his crime resolution, his actual solving of murders, his solving of rapes and everything else is not particularly high, but it's very hard to get those documents because he makes it that way. There's not a very transparent operation going on at the BSO. You know, they're still looking for Jacqueline Kennedy's husband's murderer or whatever, OJ's wife's murderer, because that's how it works. So the bottom line is, this is a fight for the country. This is a fight for the rule of law, the real rule of law, not that shit that the Soviets are talking about or the socialists are talking about. It's for the safety of your own family, okay? And we're not going to sit back while these activist sheriffs sabotage the fight from the inside. So that's about it for now. If you're in another county in Florida, check into what your sheriff is up to, because they usually keep it down. In the other counties that are not so openly Democrat, they usually keep it down. Like my town is mostly run by Democrats. It's a mostly Republican community. It's changing because of the New Yorkers. Mostly Republican community that's run by Democrats, because during our election cycle, you don't have to mention what political party you're in, and any asshole wearing a blue blazer and khaki pants is assumed to be one of the Republicans. But they're rhinos at best, and they are Democrats deep undercover at worst. And that happens a lot in, let's say, below Orlando, because above Orlando is a whole different ballgame. All right. So that's all I have for you on this one. F. Sheriff Tony. I didn't like Israel either, who was the guy before him, not the country. And we need to have a real sheriff for once, because there's too much room for graft and corruption in this county as it is. I mean, stupid graft and corruption. You know, not the traditional, you know, I'm not going to overlook this order of moonshine shit. I'm talking about bad, bad things. So that's all we have for now. And have a good weekend otherwise. Talk to you later on.